It's March 15th, 2015. John Key is the Prime Minister. The number one song in the country is 4-5 Seconds by Rihanna, Kanye West and Paul McCartney. The country is bracing for a nationwide weather bomb as Cyclone Pam rips through the Pacific. But what we didn't know then is that a bomb of a very different kind was about to be dropped on a humble, family-friendly singing show, and it would rock the nation to its core. Join us as we remember when Natalia Kills and Willy Moon blew up X Factor NZ.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to state the obvious. We have a doppelganger in our midst.
Kia ora koutou, welcome to Remember When. This is your weekly dose of pop culture nostalgia in Aotearoa, brought to you by The Real Pod. My name is Alex Casey, and I am joined today by two people who in many ways are the Natalia Kills and Willy Moon to my Joe Irvine. It's Jane Yee and Duncan Greive.
Kia ora, Alex.
So good to be here.
It is so good to be here. Back in 2015, before all the bad stuff happened.
Oh, so nice. I'm so excited that we're doing this series. It feels so good to just nestle in the bosom of nostalgia.
Well, we've been doing like 8 years of training to get to this. I feel like we didn't know that this was our final form, and now we're here. And we're talking about, you know, I think this is one of the most, in terms of like the scope of this podcast, this is probably the most, this was an international incident. It was the most significant kind of catalyzing, chaotic event, I think, that's happened in the life of this podcast.
Before we go any further, Jane, you have an important announcement.
I do have an important announcement. So, you know, a lot of you will be familiar with the old school version of The Real Pod. That still lives on. It lives on in our Substack. So you can go and sign up to our Substack. It's called The Real Pod Extra, which is therealpod.substack.com. There's going to be lots of content on there, including behind-the-scenes pics, notes, chats, all of that stuff. Plus, if you're a paid subscriber, you'll get a whole extra episode of The Real Pod each week, which is where we do, as I said, our old school reality tele recaps. We're doing Traitors at the moment. Also, pop culture news, real-life chats, all of that stuff. So, again, you can go to our Substack. The link to that's in our show notes, as well as some links to Facebook groups, Discord, the works. But we can't live in the here and now. We need to go back before Substack even existed.
We need to go back. So let's start by talking, before we get into the specifics of this moment, what we remember in terms of this time, this era for X Factor NZ. Because what jumps out for me straight away is the Twitter hashtag. That to me was like the essential part of the success of the show and the explosiveness of this moment. Like, I remember going home after social netball, rushing to like my friend's flat for us all to get ready to live tweet. And it was like a blood sport. Like, it was like comedians, media people, journalists, Hillary, Barry, just everyone was live tweeting this show and seeing who could be the fastest, the funniest. And it was so much fun. And I miss it so much.
It was the whole X Factor brand was a massive worldwide phenomenon. And then it came here and we did it pretty good. Like, the set was pretty flash, you know, and all that kind of stuff. We had some good singers. We had some not as good singers. But all in all, for a New Zealand, you know, replicating a format that had been so big abroad, I think we did great. And so there was so much excitement and anticipation. And it was still a time where we watched the telly on the telly.
Yeah. Well, the liveness of it too was massive, right? Like, we didn't really have that before. And we had one season already, Jackie Thomas's season, which had, you know, Daniel Bedingfield as a judge, which was kind of crazy.
See, I'm immediately remembering it wrong, because I'm immediately remembering this as that's just how embedded this season is it's like it's the only season as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and Benny Tippenair came from that first season. Like, there was like star power in X Factor.
Yeah, you could be created as a wholly, I think I wrote maybe even like a cover story for Rip It Up about Benny Tippenair. Like the idea that an X Factor, like he didn't win, right? Like that he could be on the cover of a music magazine. It's kind of extraordinary. You know, in terms of the monoculture was clearly alive and well there because it could grip the whole nation, and it generated moments like this. This was obviously another level, but it felt like consequential enough that the whole country was at least glancingly aware that this was happening, even before the events of that night.
Can I just flag that 2015, all those things that you mentioned, but also the year The Real Pod was born.
Isn't that special?
Well, and then the other big event a few months after was Crystal Chenery
That's right.
With Dom Harvey and that, which.
Oh, that's another episode, though, isn't it?
Oh, it is another
we'll get to
episode, but do you know what I
that.
mean? Like the fact that those two things happen within a couple of months of each other, that just kind of seared, like, to split the decade in two. Kind of crazy.
And X Factor NZ, not to gaze too hard at our own navels, but that was also like early spin-off. You know,
First
that
Power
was
Rankings.
like, you know, we were squatting in an office on K Road, and suddenly there was just like all this incredible TV news and reality TV to cover.
I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that without this incident, the Crystal Chenery thing, the fact of there being so much interest in these shows, I don't know if the spin-off would have survived, because it generated huge amounts of traffic that we ultimately converted into other things. So yeah, again, it's a navel-gazing thing, but I truly think it was sort of existentially important to us surviving.
Ruined Willy Moon and Natalia Kill's careers, but made ours. So thank you very much.
Thanks
for your
you.
sacrifice. Tell us what actually happened. What are we
Yeah.
even talking about here? Because it's not just X Factor, it's a moment on the X Factor.
It's a moment. And before we get into the moment, there had already been moments on this series already up until this point. This was the season where the show had to apologise for casting someone who had been convicted of manslaughter.
Oh my God!
If you remember Shea Brider, the Shea Brider incident had happened earlier this season.
I don't remember.
How is it that we've managed to cast so many disreputable people on our shows? Like, we've never learned the lesson.
I'm
Like,
very worried about why Bake Off suddenly is not
I know.
happening when it was supposed to be, you know? Like it was promoted and suddenly it's like,
it was the all murderer season. Oh, maybe there's some bad taste.
And there had been a controversy. So Willy Moon and Natalia Kills had come on board. They were both, I think, largely a mystery to most people. Willy Moon had that big Apple song, that Yeah song, but they had this sort of air of celebrity about them because they looked kind of crazy and like sleek and stuff and like bats. And there had been a news story because some hotel owner sold their bed sheets on trade.
Oh,
Do you
incredible.
remember this? This was before
when
that.
they call like literally they're fucked in bed sheets.
That's what
Oh, no,
Natalia
that's what
Kills
they call-
called
which
it.
she was actually amazing.
she just sent up the value of that by saying that, you know?
She was. So there was so much going on already in the lead up to this particular moment. When we saw Joe Irvine, who was a beloved character at this stage on the show, he was in the overs category,
Yep.
which I think means over 21. Ancient crone.
But he was a very kind of like, just a very naive, sweet, what you see is what you get kind of a guy,
He
right?
would cry a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
it
was
was-
like his thing, is that he would cry almost every episode. And he was closing the show, and it was a big song. He was doing an Ella Fitzgerald song, and it was like in the package, if you rewatch it, he's clearly like really nervous. Mel Blatt's trying to get him to do these big notes, a lot riding on it. He comes out, I think smashes it. I don't know. I'm not.
Well, the thing about Joe Irwin was he was a real binary kind of a guy. Like he was capable of transcendent grace in the context of X Factor, but he could also absolutely pants it in a way that no one else did. So the sort of the ceiling and the basement were a long way apart with him, and incredibly emotional guy. So every time he came out, you were already keyed up for it in a way that you weren't with some of the other contestants. So that's kind of why when she started to make these statements, you were just like anyone but Joe, because you kind of almost felt paternal, or, you know, like a parental kind of vibe with him.
And so he came out, slick back hair, wearing a suit.
Not a suit.
Not a suit. It was clearly like, to me, I remember being like, James Bond. Like he's doing a James Bond
Or
thing. There was like
Sinatra,
silhouettes
you know.
of. Yeah.
It's just there's a long history of people wearing suits. on
Exactly.
stage.
But it was like the silhouettes of the woman and stuff like there's shadows. Like to me, I just thought it was a James Bond thing. What I didn't realize is like the whole way through, Natalia Kills is throwing massive looks at Joe. And I don't think anyone saw what was coming. When she went to give her critique, she just unleashes this absolute tirade. You're artistically atrocious. I'm embarrassed to be sitting here. I am disgusted at how much you have copied my husband, inventor of the suit, William Moon.
Yeah, someone really needs to fix that wiki to make that just permanent.
I, as an artist who respects creative integrity and intellectual property, I am disgusted at how much you have copied my husband. From the hair to the suit, do you not have any value or respect for originality?
And it goes on for so long.
So long. I think when she first opened her mouth, like live in the moment, and she was like, What was her first words? Do you remember?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a doppelganger in our midst.
And I thought she was about to be like, you just did an amazing, like, homage to some, I thought she was going to like be giving him this amazing feedback. So it was absolute whiplash when the rest just like thundered out of her mouth.
And the crowd is like wooing when she says that. Like they think everyone thought the same. But what I've learned in my extensive conversations with sources close to production is that a lot of people there couldn't even hear what she was saying. Like they didn't realize what was happening. So the crowd is just kind of like wooing just as you would for judges' comments after an amazing performance.
Yeah.
And under that, she's just like fully unleashing.
It was so venomous. It was so venomous.
But then there is that weird, because you don't quite clock to what's happening, and you can see on his face, like he initially sort of smiling and laughing, and then there's a bit of confusion. Like it takes him a while for him to realize that she is deadly serious with this completely unhinged critique.
And to his credit, he handles it so well. After she finishes, he goes, "Thanks, Natalia, you're beautiful," which I think is like the most incredible high road I've ever seen on live television. But what struck me rewatching it, and I'd be interested to know what you think, is Willy Moon's follow-up is so much worse than what Natalia Kills says. He says, it's cheap and absurd. It's a bit like Norman Bates dressing up in his mother's clothing. It's just a little bit creepy. And I feel like you're going to stitch someone's skin to your face and kill everybody in the audience.
Oh, that's quite low.
It's so hectic, that part. And it's been kind of buried under the initial tirade from her. But it's not said in a kind of jokey way. It comes off as if, like he's mortally wounded by this suit wearing. It's so intense.
It's like Norman Bates dressing up in his mother's clothing. It's just a little bit creepy, and I feel like you're going to stitch someone's skin to your face and then kill everybody in the audience.
And then there was immediately the whole nation, particularly on Twitter, just went bonkers.
But it was everyone. I mean, I'm sure that like Key would have been asked about it at question time. It felt like you had to have a position on this, and the position had to be denouncing the fact they were fired within 24 hours. Like normally, even with something really bad, they take a while to be just, should we just hunker down and take the ratings next week? Like this was just, there was such an abhorrence about it.
And that was another thing that I heard from people is that, again, they didn't know in the room the severity of what had just happened. It was only when they checked the hashtag that things got crazy. I mean, X Factor had put out a statement within an hour after the episode of the show, like saying we do not condone bullying, blah, blah, blah. By the next day, there was like a 46,000 strong petition for them to be fired. And by the Monday night elimination show,
gone.
They were gone.
It was crazy. One tiny thing from the actual clip itself, and I remembered it at the time and I'd forgotten, but is it Stan Walker's the other judge saying, but didn't you copy Cleopatra? Underrated, like just live burn on her, just mwah.
Yeah, there is also an exchange, like Mel and Stan go into bat, and like Mel clearly as his mentor is like very fired up about it. She later calls Natalia Kills a twat on Twitter.
Twat.
And it's still there. It was cool that Mel Blatt was here. Like, fuck.
That's the real news.
Amazing.
How do Willy Moon and Natalia Kills sit there thinking they're all there when they've got Mel Blatt from All Saints sitting next to them?
It's crazy, eh? And I think some people thought, because, she had come over from England like Natalia Kills, and they had sort of had this international look and feel that maybe they thought they could just kind of get away with anything because it was just little old New Zealand.
They truly were not that big of a deal, though.
No.
Like, they really weren't.
No one knew.
I mean, Stereogram got a song on an Apple ad as
really,
well.
As a country, we've really punched high on the Apple ads category.
And so they both of the other judges had tweeted out things, the twat and Champion. Stan Walker. That's so weird that I just said champion instead of Stan Walker.
He's a champion.
I mean it.
That's true. I mean, he won his thing, right?
He said, that's why I said this. You think it's all right to champion yourself and your disgusting actions with no remorse for being a bully. Wake up, man. Humble yourself. This was all on the X Factor hashtag. Hillary Barry came in. Jackie Thomas was tweeting. Lord sent Joe Irvine cupcakes famously. It was this massive outpouring of support. And also, we have to say, like, vitriol for Natalia kills and Willy Moon that was probably a bit over the top, ultimately.
Yeah, well, I think...
When was it in the aftermath of this that they were cited at the that bakery in Kingsland?
Oh my God, no, that was in the lead up to it too. Willy Moon called someone a CUNT at the Baker's Cottage in
Real
Kingsland.
amazingly
great little
chaotic
bakery.
kind of 6 weeks in New Zealand for those two.
Yeah, and then we're like, we didn't see it coming. It's like, I don't know. Maybe the clues were there.
I mean, I remember, like, because obviously we it was just the two of us working at the Spinoff at the time, but I think we had Don Rowe, a very young reporter, I think was maybe interning with us or working part-time. We dispatched, I had a source leak that because they were fleeing the country, after they got fired, it was very like, we almost have to smuggle them out of the country. They are in danger. And we got word that they were leaving. And so we, for the first and only time, sent our version of a paparazzi, like a guy with a phone, to the airport to stake them out. And we got this 7-second grainy video. And Don actually wrote a fantastic piece sort of describing the scene. It's sort of hours of boredom and then this electric moment. He described them as scurrying like insects or some kind of a thing. But that video was enormous. It was like the only footage I think anyone got.
It's got millions of views. It's a few seconds.
It's just, the whole thing is just mind-boggling.
I remember sitting at Tank on K Road and hearing literally the people on the street talking about, I just remember it felt like it was just everywhere for 48 hours. And they were gone, not just from the show, from the country.
Yeah.
Within 48 hours. Go Kiwi. That's powerful of us. But it was just the perfect combination, I think, of Joe Irvine being such a sympathetic character, these two being these sort of outsiders coming in, who do they think they are?
Yeah.
But also what cannot be overstated, which people have told me, is the fact that there was this weather bomb coming. Everyone was hunkered down at home watching TV. The media had been bracing for all this coverage of this big weather event that didn't happen. And that also contributed to this just enormous explosion of news.
I've just been scouring my Twitter because I would have absolutely been live tweeting. I would have had 1-year-old or nearly 1-year-old twins, not even little baby twins that I'd put down to bed watch X Factor. But it's just jumped back into my memory as we've been talking that David Dallas would come over and watch it at our house with us. And we'd all be sitting there live tweeting and watching X Factor while this was all going down.
It was just the tweeting I missed so much. All my very
that was what Twitter was
offline
for.
friends, people signed up to Twitter that I knew just to be a part of the X Factor NZ hashtag.
It was so cozy.
It was just the best time
I tell you
ever.
what, very few hashtag Celebrity Treasure Island fans versus faves earlier this year on the Twitter. So times have changed.
It's too bad. And then, within I think it was only 3 or 4 days later, it was announced that there were 2 new judges, Natalie Bassingthwaite and Shelton Woolwright.
That's right.
And they just took the stage and everyone just acted like nothing had happened.
No, nothing had happened. No, but of course there was some, eventually Natalia Kills and Willy Moon had some stuff to say about the incident, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming there was a prisoner exchange at some point. We sent the UK some of our, this was a diplomatic incident, and had to be dealt with in appropriate channels.
That's right. She did kind of allude to, she did speak publicly eventually saying there are many sides to this story and I'm not about to get an entire industry in trouble that has been going on for years and years entertaining the masses. So thank you absolutely everyone for your support.
So there was definitely, I think, a big Twitter thread about how the producers had told them to go hard. And I think...
And that they deliberately baited her by putting him in a suit. I mean,
okay,
what?
that definitely wasn't the case. But I wouldn't be surprised if the producers had invited the kind of more, confident judges to go hard.
Yeah,
just not,
that's their jobs.
Just not that hard, because the producers would have been sat there in that moment going, oh shit, no, not this, not that. No. Imagine being in that role at that time, being like, great, we know they're going to bring it tonight, and then no, they brought too much.
But but again, I do think that you wouldn't have necessarily known at the time the scale that thing would reach. We've just been talking about the New Zealand reaction. This was absolutely Daily Mail. It was
Simon
all around the
Cowell
world.
commented publicly. And I think immediately the kind of crisis comms management went above to
Yeah, because this was the most valuable TV franchise in the world at that time. bar none. And just because the branch office in New Zealand, which brings in precisely piss all revenue, had decided to kind of blow up, which we've done with most of our shows, to be fair, you do not endanger this golden goose. So that's basically why they had to be executed and smuggled out more than anything.
And we never got X Factor back again.
That was it.
Willy Moo, Natalia Kills went back to the UK. She changed her artist name to Teddy Sinclair. They created a band called Cruel Youth. I've tried to contact their agents. Haven't had a lot of luck.
What are they up to? What are they up to these days?
I don't know. Their house burned down. That made headlines a few years
I mean,
ago, which was sad.
she got nominated for a Grammy for co-writing Kiss It Better, which is an absolute jam for Rihanna.
She wrote some great
Phenomenal.
songs, I have to say. When you said what did you say? Their house burnt down. I thought you were going to say their house sitting. And I was like, man, how the mighty have fallen, you know?
Yeah, I did think it was slightly gleeful, like the media coverage of the house burning down. They went to like Joe Irvine's manager for comment about it, being like, cool.
What's Joe up to?
It's an eternal question.
Yeah.
I do not know. We've tried.
We have tried.
Yeah.
Get in
Probably
touch.
suit shopping, I assume.
I don't know if he'd ever wear a suit again after that.
He should start
Too
a suit
dangerous.
label, is what he should do.
Pop quiz. Do you remember who won X Factor 2015? Isn't that amazing? It's like completely wiped everything that happened either side of it.
Wow.
For the
So
franchise.
Jackie Thomas won the first one. Oh my God.
This is crazy.
Bowmonger? There you go.
You remember that? The
wow.
loop pedal? The like, he was the winner.
He won? That is a crazy outsider.
I know. So that was the end of the franchise. So what are our final thoughts on the legacy of the Kills Moon explosion?
I think I forget just how big it was because I'm in, at the time I was just like, hanging around with my babies. But because I'm in media, I always kind of remember it as like a big thing in media circles. So it's just interesting to kind of remember how global it went. Simon Cowell got involved. My other kind of final thought on this is that I have absolutely just conflated every moment of X Factor in New Zealand into one season, and it's that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess the thing that really sticks out for me is the level of sort of fury that was associated with what was fundamentally like some rudeness on a reality TV show. It just seems like so quaint and sweet versus like what we knew, the kind of crazy Brexit, Trump, pandemic nightmare season that was kind of rolling down at us and we didn't know it at the time. I kind of miss the era where that was what rocked the nation,
Yeah, someone being mean to someone a bit on a telly show is the worst thing.
Take me back, which is what this podcast is
Well,
about.
that's why we're here, and we will be back again next week and every Thursday, hopefully forever, because we're never going to run out of the past, right? If we just keep going.
Yeah.
We keep
it'll
making more of
happening.
it.
It's amazing. So make sure you join us next week. This has been Remember When. Thanks for remembering with us. New tagline?
Yes, I love it.
Thanks for remembering with us.
And that's a wrap.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, you've been listening to The Real Pod, hosted by me, Jane Yee, along with Alex Casey and, most of the time, Duncan Greive. Our producers are T.I. Butler and Samuel Robinson. Thanks for listening.